Imagine, just for a second, that you're standing right in the middle of the Nevada desert. You look around, and there is absolutely nothing but sand, towering mountains, and just utter silence. But here is the wild part. 150 years ago, this very spot you're imagining was one of the richest, most bustling cities in America. I mean, thousands of people lived here. Millionaires were literally being minted practically overnight. And then poof, it just disappeared. Across the American West, dozens of these cities rose to fame in a flash, only to become total ghost towns a few years later. Some got swallowed whole by the desert sands. Others were abandoned to the very second the money dried up. And a few, well, they remain absolute mysteries to this day. So welcome to The Explainer. Today we're investigating the fascinating boom and bust cycle of the 19th century American West. We're going to uncover exactly why these bustling, incredibly wealthy cities simply vanished from the map, leaving behind nothing but empty streets and buried secrets. All right, let's dive right in. Now, to really understand the bust, we first have to wrap our heads around the massive transformation that took place on the American frontier during the 1800s. I mean, the West didn't just grow, it exploded. And it all started with a single, shiny catalyst. It all kicks off in 1848. Gold is discovered in California, and bam, it triggers one of the largest human migrations in American history. As gold, silver, and copper were struck across the West, settlements started popping up in these empty valleys almost overnight. First, they were just tents, then wooden buildings. But soon after, we're talking banks, theaters, hotels, and churches. The people building these brick-and-mortar cities genuinely believed they would last forever. But, as we'll see, many only survived for a few short years. Let's look at our first piece of evidence. Exhibit A, Bodie, California. I really want you to let this number sink in for a second. 10,000. After gold was discovered nearby, Bodie didn't just grow, it mutated into one of the richest mining towns in the entire West. At its absolute peak, this remote, middle-of-nowhere desert outpost boasted nearly 10,000 residents. And, to accommodate all those miners walking around with pockets full of fresh gold, the town had more than 60 saloons. 60! That is a staggering amount of sudden wealth, and let's be honest, probably quite a few hangovers, concentrated in a place that also had banks, hotels, schools, and churches. But Bodie wasn't just rich, it was notoriously violent. In fact, the locals actually had a saying, prepare for trouble before sunset. Shootings were just an everyday occurrence. Robberies happened on the regular. It was the quintessential movie-style Wild West. But here's the tragic twist. When the gold began to disappear from the earth, the people disappeared right along with it. The saloons emptied out, the banks closed their doors, and today, Bodie remains completely frozen in time, preserved as one of America's most famous ghost towns. Moving on to Exhibit B, Rhyolite, Nevada. So Rhyolite was founded in 1904 following a major gold strike, and it quickly became one of the fastest-growing communities in all of Nevada. I mean, within a few short years, this town, which, remember, is sitting in the middle of a barren desert near Death Valley, had electric lights, a fully functioning hospital, schools, hotels, its own stock exchange, and a grand stone bank. They were literally building a permanent, modern metropolis out of the dust. But the contrast here is just staggering. 5 years. That is all it took to face utter ruin. And disaster struck not from the mines, but actually from Wall Street. The financial panic of 1907 completely dried up investment capital. Without that money flowing in from the east, gold production slowed to a crawl. The residents saw the writing on the wall, packed up their belongings, and just left. Within a single decade, one of the West's most promising, highly developed cities was reduced to nothing but empty ruins. And that brings us to Exhibit C, Cerro Gordo. Cerro Gordo became unimaginably wealthy from silver mining. Actually, the mines here produced so much wealth that they helped finance the early growth of Los Angeles. Think about that. But this prosperity, it came at a really steep price. The residents were forced to deal with brutal, harsh weather conditions way up on the mountain, incredibly dangerous working conditions down in the mines, and, you guessed it, frequent violence. The human toll was massive. And just like the others, as silver production ultimately declined, the families moved away, leaving the town to the elements. Though, pretty amazingly, modern restoration efforts are actually bringing parts of it back to life today to preserve its history. So, looking at all of this, why did they vanish? Well, Bodie, Rhyolite, Cerro Gordo, they all shared one fatal flaw: the single-industry economy. Think about modern cities today, right? They have diverse economies. If one sector struggles, say tech has a bad year, healthcare or manufacturing can keep the city afloat. But these frontier towns bet their entire existence, literally every single dollar and every single resident, on one industry: mining. When that single industry dried up, the town immediately failed right along with it. They had absolutely no safety net. Because they were so fragile, a single structural hazard could act as a total death blow. Sometimes the mines simply ran out of valuable ore. Or, like we saw in Rhyolite, investors stopped providing money because of economic downturns back east. Sometimes the railroads just changed their routes, entirely bypassing once thriving towns and cutting off their lifelines. Other times, massive fires swept through and destroyed the densely packed wooden buildings. And out in the desert, severe water shortages made sustaining a growing community physically impossible. Their economic existence was basically a house of cards.
Which brings us to hidden treasures and mysteries.
Because the story isn't quite over. Today, modern treasure hunters are actively out there searching for forgotten gold caches. Beneath these empty towns, sprawling networks of old mine tunnels remain deeply unexplored. And a lot of people believe that incredibly valuable artifacts are still buried beneath the collapsed buildings. While sure, some of these stories might be exaggerated tall tales, ongoing discoveries constantly remind us that the American West still tightly holds its secrets beneath those shifting sands and rugged mountains. These lost cities of the American West are so much more than just abandoned wooden buildings. Their buildings may be silent, but their history continues to shape America's story. It's a tale of unbridled ambition, massive opportunity, terrifying risk, and just how staggeringly fast fortunes can rise and fall. Today, the desert wind moves through empty streets where thousands of people once lived, worked, and dreamed of striking it rich. Their history is permanently etched into the landscape. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. What secrets are still buried out there in the desert? What artifacts, what veins of gold, what untold stories are just waiting under the sand right now, waiting to be uncovered? It kind of makes you look at those empty, silent valleys a whole lot differently, doesn't it? Well, if you enjoyed this explainer and want to uncover more hidden histories, forgotten places, and unsolved mysteries, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.